I ended in a place of union with the divine where love, beauty, truth, joy, understanding, knowledge, or the edge of infinity, wisdom, light were all an integration of one being that expanded and inflated me. I had a self, but it was my known higher self.
Yes, Peter, thank you so much for giving us the chance to speak to you today. So Peter is actually a former church pastor and a spiritual integration counselor who had a near-death experience in 1980 while ice climbing. So I think you were attempting a famous climb with an axe and a hammer, as opposed to the two usual axes, which made the ascent much slower than expected. And by the time you reached the top of the pitch, the sun had set, so things were starting to get a little chilly. As hypothermia was starting to set in, you made the decision to try and get off the mountain, and just before dawn you succumbed to the final stages of hypothermia, which I believe is when your experience began. So yeah, why don't I let you take over and we'll take it from there.
Yes, so my experience was lengthy, and I've talked about it in lots of places, so I'll try to summarize it here. I ended in a place of union with the divine where love, beauty, truth, joy, understanding, knowledge, infinity, or the edge of infinity, wisdom, light were all an integration of one being that expanded and inflated me. And I was in this state of union without any more of Peter left. I had a self, but it was my known higher self, not one of my incarnations. I was shown many of my incarnations during this experience, and Peter was just one of them, and they were none of me. I was this infinite being that had limitation. It's hard to, I know that's paradoxical. Infinity doesn't have limitation, but the infinity was making me exist and was me and inside of me, even though there was this thin barrier of separation. And simultaneous to all of that, I was entangled with this multiplicity, this infinite points of divine light, a septillion times googolplex of these many aspects of the divine, all entangled with each other, and that constituted the fullness of the divine mind. All of this is metaphor, and I was one of them, and yet I was not in the whole field. I was connected to the field, the many, and the one. I was separate from it and connected to it simultaneously. I had a hellish experience preceding this where I went through all of the wounds that I had given away in my life in a sequence, and I was the other person to whom I gave the wound. I experienced it as they had experienced it, only it was magnified to what I thought I had been giving them, because simultaneously I was experiencing what I had done to them from my point of view. And in both of these cases, the divine being wasn't like in the Catholic tradition, and the joke is that Peter meets you at the Golden Gate and he's got a book and he looks you up. There's no book. The divine being was me. It experienced everything that I experienced as me, and the same with every person that I had encountered. And the weight of the wounds that I gave showed me my own self-attachment, my own self-involvement, my shame. I was ashamed, not that I was a human being, because I was shown that this was part of being human, not just human, but part of being alive is to consume something else, to wound something else. But in comparison to the infinite light itself, to the unlimited love, this mercy, this forgiveness that was pouring out and had always been pouring out, I was ashamed of my limitation. But the unlimited was not ashamed of me. I wasn't accused of anything. I was just shown myself. And meanwhile, as I went through these experiences, the divine spoke to me without sound, saying, I love you, I made you, I am you, I'm with you, I'm always with you. And all I had to do was turn to the light. And I was enfolded into this union experience. There's a lot of things I could tell you about this very lengthy experience, but I want to mention this void that I was in. when I first arrived, I was in a void the size of our galaxy. If you've ever looked up on a starry night, you see a section of the galaxy. It was that, only there were no stars, yet I could see in this darkness. And there was this edge. And I was a content in my own beingness. I knew myself as I was, as I'd always been. And I was being told that Creator created me, creates me. The isness is always in the now. And that this is an unending process for me. At another point in this experience, there were all these levels that I went through, all these heavens, you could say. And I was swept across this void and to the edge of it, where I was partly poked out of it. So the majority of me at this point felt like I was the totality of this space behind me, if I had a behind. And the divine being was speaking love to me there. But a portion of me was witnessing the creation, the constant and original creation of our universe, out of this deep darkness, out of this deep infinity that I couldn't see into because it was beyond my capacity. Out of this deep, greater darkness, light was pouring, and this light wove itself into the structure of the energy and molecules and atoms and matter and minerals of our entire universe, so that there was light woven into everything that there was. And I could see our universe. I could see galaxies and stars, and as I was watching this light pour out, I saw other universes being created by Creator. And as I watched this, the totality of all those universes, the infinite love, all of the light inside our universe became like a lens focused on me as this divine being that was shown that I was the most beloved that there ever was. And as I was experiencing this unconditional, overwhelming love, I was shown Earth. This is simultaneously. I was shown Earth, and I could see every single human being in live time. And inside of every human being and being was this golden light and this golden fleck of light. And that even though I was the most particularly beloved of all, uniquely so, every single light space inside a human heart was equally, and this is a paradox, uniquely, absolutely the most beloved. I can't explain this except for that nobody could see it because there was this fog over all of the earth. But I could see this light, and I could see that it was not just humanity, it was all that there is, and that the love itself, and I love this quote from James Joyce's Ulysses, love loves to love love. Love loves to love love. And that was a message that I got. There was this expansion of the divine being and this enfolding of all that was expanded, and all of it was integrated in the totality of unconditional love, and nothing was wasted or lost. And I saw my parents' faces arise from earth, and I saw and experienced, I guess I should say is more accurately, I experienced their suffering that they had endured up to that point in their life. My sister had vanished when I was a kid, long story. And I could see them separated into two sets, two timelines. And in the first timeline, I went back. And they continued in their suffering with the loss of my sister, but they didn't suffer because they lost a second child. In the second, I saw their loss of me, and this like nuclear war goes on in their lives.
Yeah.
There's like devastation of everyone, and especially my mom and dad. My mom in particular. And I saw the end of their lives, of both of these timelines, come together in a singular point of divine peace and love and paradise, which is where I was. And so I knew that the outcome was going to be beauty, but the process was not.
Mhm.
And so I understood myself as in my own eternal nature and forever and ever nature. And I recognized that the length of my incarnational lives that I had lived, which I experienced a couple of them, but there were many of them, that they were all temporary and endurable. And so I asked the voice, can I go back and help my parents not suffer this? And if I go back, can I come back here? And the voice, no sound, no language, communicated to me, and it was inside of me, and it was everything there was where I was, including me, said, yes, you can come back here to paradise. And I said, I thought to myself, well, the length of my time incarnated is the snap of a finger. I can do that. That'll be easy. But that was a heavenly point of view. I'll tell you, that's not a human point of view. So I said, I choose to live my life. And the divine said, you won't live your life, and threw me out. And I became encased in this angelic being, this angelic consciousness, which I hadn't told you, but had taken me from my body on the ice cliff, and it folded me. It grabbed me again, and it in itself was this a reduction of the fullness of the divine being. So it was in totality God, the ineffable, but also a reduction of it. I again can't really explain how this works, but it grabbed me and encased me, and I got thrown out of heaven. And as I traveled back, I became denser and denser, and that there was this beam of white light, large, huge, like the size of the sun if I was next to the sun. Okay, so I'm not like way out here on Earth, but like next to the sun, this massive beam of light paralleled us on my way out. And I looked back, and the darkness, the infinite darkness of the edge of this galaxy space that I was in I was on the outside of that now, but I wasn't in the infinite. I could see that I couldn't see into heaven, but out of this heaven came this beam of white light. And I looked ahead to see where it was going, because I was headed in the same direction. And in front of me appeared a million doorways, like a huge sunflower with all this, like all the seeds, individual seeds, and they're all doorways, and in the middle of it, in the middle of the sunflower is like the little flowerette there, and that was the divine light space, and that light space in its purity extended all the way out to the outer edges of this gigantic sunflower like space, and the light faded as it got out to the edges. And the divine being that was carrying me, this consciousness, spoke to me from itself and also from the divine fullness. So it was like these two voices as one. And it said to me, choose light, choose a life. And I knew that it wanted me to enter into the little floweret of the divine being light. I knew that it did. And yet I had this willfulness that made me think I need to be most human. I need, if I'm going to go, and I had this message. I knew that I was to bring back this message, and which I couldn't articulate even then. I just was this experience of the divine light. And I then chose, and very quickly, a series of ideas about the life I wanted to live, and I didn't go into the middle. I went off to the side, some distance, close to the center, but not in the center, where there was still a lot of light, but not in the intensity of it. And then that doorway opened, and I went down this tunnel, and in this tunnel were all these other doorways leading to all these other lives. Because the divine being told me, as it threw me out, you won't live your, I said, I choose to live my life. And the being said, without sound, you won't live your life. And I'm not. And I went down this tunnel. I got to the end of it. The angelic being sort of took me out of itself and pierced me into the human body in front of me, for which I had no concern whatsoever. I didn't know who they were. I didn't really care. And it jabbed me into this body, and I filled inside of it, and instantaneously all of the healing and wellness and well-being and peace and joy went away in its intensity. And I was in this physical form of confinement, and I could still see this piercing space and my clavicle, where I could see the divine messenger who carried me, sort of more formed, less ethereal, less like plasma, and then this thing closed up, and I could feel the brain of this thing that I was in kind of begin to work again. And I then began to hear sound, and I didn't know what it was, because I couldn't understand where I was or what was going on. And I opened my eyes and there was a face in my face, and I was body was being racked and kind of pounded on the cliff I was on. It was a flat area we were on, and and it resolved into language: "Don't die, don't die, don't die, don't die!" And screaming and yelling and tears and fear. The fear was just like I could feel all of this from him. I could feel all of his pain and fright, and and then suddenly he realized my eyes were open, and he's, "Oh my God, you were dead. I thought you were dead. Oh my God, if you," and he's screaming and yelling, and he pulls me up, and he was overjoyed that I wasn't dead, and I wasn't. I was just completely confused on what was going on, who he was, where I was, what was going on, and he kept talking, and eventually I began to remember where I was and who I had been, and we had been stuck on this cliff. The rope had been stuck, and then I think because of the way I fell off the edge, the rope came free. I had to get like off the cliff to get the rope free. It was jammed, and then we descended and self-treated for hypothermia, and eventually, because the car was right across the park, we were in the Icefields Parkway in Western Canada, and the parkway, this climb was right on the parkway. And so we eventually, after hours of processing, going through the hypothermic recovery process, I was a first responder person, and we heated our bodies back up, and I was an entirely different person than I was the day before. Hours before, I was totally instantaneously a new being, but I didn't understand where I had been. I only knew that I was angry that I left it and had come back here.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for sharing this amazing story. And yeah, from what I understand, you made the decision of returning to this physical realm, but you've come to regret it for some.
I did. From the moment I came back, I didn't realize, what I didn't understand was this one, you could talk about percentages as 100%. This was a zillion percent of the divine light. And when I came back, I had like 0.1% of it. I had it. It was still here. It didn't go away. But in comparison, not a comparison. No comparison. And so I thought, and I was pretty angry for a very long time. Even while I was deep in the pursuit of the divine being. So I was like I had these two things going on. I was super upset that I had chosen to come back and that I wasn't warned, even though I was warned. And also I knew that it was the only thing that I desired was the presence of the light inside me. And so this desperation and this regret drove my interior life of contemplation. And so it turned out in the end that the thing that hurt me the most was the thing that drove me back to heaven now.
Wow. So let's talk about your integration process. Because you mentioned that you came back a new being, but the readjustment is very difficult. Obviously it takes a number of years. So yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more how your integration was.
It was long. It's ongoing. I'm 45 years out from this experience, and it's ongoing. The first 20 years were the hardest, and it wasn't until I died again in 2015, 10 years ago, last month, that my integration became. It's not done, but I reached this level of self-understanding that enabled me to have no regrets at all about coming back. But in the meanwhile, this was 1980, and even though Dr. Moody had published his fabulous book, I had no idea even what to call what had happened to me, let alone know where to look. And so I was fortunate, though, that I was an English major, and I'd been studying the transcendentalists. I'm from New England, and so that's a big deal here. The transcendentalists like Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson and all these, Emily Dickinson, and also the Romantics, the British Romantics, Blake and blanking all their names right now, Wordsworth and others like that. And so I had an exposure to transcendentalism. And so I used that exposure to begin a deep journey into mystical literature globally. And eventually, I went for my graduate degree in mysticism. It was a master's of divinity at Yale, and the dean of students allowed me to a 3-year study of mysticism, East and West. I could do it, and so I spent 3 years doing this work, trying to find my peer group, and I did. All these dead people who had been mystics: Rumi, Kafir, Yogananda, Jesus, Lao Tzu. The list is really long, but that was all the intellectual work that I did. But really, which gave me a self-understanding and a language, ability to think about it. But what really helped my integration process, besides dying the second time, which was a big deal for me, it was my interior journey. And I'd gone to a Catholic high school. And in my Catholic boys' high school was near this monastery where they developed centering prayer practice back in the late 1970s because so many hippies were off, dropping LSD and turning to Eastern meditation. And I participated in that kind of life too. But I had this mystical experience. Well, I should tell you, because my sister had vanished my senior year of high school, she came back. She disappeared again with the baby. I was under this family order not to talk about it, and I tried to take my life. I had a bleeding ulcer. I was sick, emotionally sick of a decade of this. Well, not a decade, 4 years of it. And so I took a triple hit of LSD, my first trip, and had this God experience of the I am being inside of all things, and it transformed me. And so a couple of months later, my senior year, one of the teachers, my religion teacher, went off to the monastery, learned centering prayer, and taught it to us. And I became adept instantaneously. It's like it became the anchor. And so I began my meditation practice. And by the time I died, that was 1977. I died in 1980. I had 3 years of daily regular practice, because in the peace and the stillness, the I am who I am, the I is who I is, the beingness of the isness itself was experiential. Like I could touch the very edge in the stillness. And so that became my anchor of my integration. Simultaneously with that, after I was back at my university studying mime, and because I did a lot of theater. And so one of my classes, one of my teachers was a pantomime teacher in the school of Marcel Marceau, who taught Hatha Yoga. And my teacher knew about Chi, and I read Paramahansa Yogananda all at the same time. And my yoga mime teacher helped me find my prana, my experiential thing was like an energy that I could concentrate with. So I integrated, I read the Yoga Sutras all at the same time. I was reading and reading and reading. All I did was read. And so I integrated the Yoga Sutras practice of Kriya Yoga, Paramahansa Yogananda's idea of Kriya Yoga, and the idea that if you do this, you will get that, the science of yoga. I didn't know it was going to work, but I believed him. And so I integrated that with my physical yoga, my asanas, and my centering prayer. And that became the basis of my integration life. I was alone. There was no one I trusted. I trusted no one. I kept my mouth shut about this, partly because I had no idea how to talk about it, and but also because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. I was living in this world where every single human being, then and now, has an aura around them, and it's not just human beings; it's trees and grass and flora and fauna. Everything that there is has this. I can see it. And I knew that if I started talking about this, people would be like, let's send him away. So I kept my mouth shut for 20 years, and I went on this interior journey by myself. And in the process, I found that the more I dove inside myself, I tried to integrate into the world. I masked in the world. I tried to hide it. It poured out everywhere I was. But the more I leaned into the interior journey, the more I leaned into the stillness and the oneness of being, the more balance I had in the world. And that's sort of counterintuitive. You would think that if you lean into the world, you get your balance, but that's not my experience. And so the more I integrated into my original self, into my true self, into the non-attachment to my human self, the better my integration went. But I was still an oddball. I mean, even in the ministry, I was kind of what's up with this guy? He's barefoot all the time. Why is he doing that? What's he meditating all about? He's standing on his head. I got thrown out of the divinity school library for doing yoga one day. I was standing on my head, and the librarian's like, "You get out of here for a week. We don't have that kind of stuff in here." And so I was odd man out, except for in here. And so the integration process, and that's aspect of the divine integration. There's also the psychological integration, and I spent a lot of time in therapy. I spent summer last year doing somatic therapy. Just because I had an NDE doesn't mean that the wounds that I had as a child don't want to manifest themselves in my life. And so it's been this ongoing effort of emotional and psychological and spiritual integration and intellectual pursuit. I'm still on the journey, though.
No, integration never really ends. Absolutely. No. I'm aware of that. Well, so this links very nicely to my next question. So as an integration counselor, I know that this topic requires a lot more time than what we have available today, but would you have any recommendations for NDErs to help with the integration process?
Yeah, talk to other NDErs, even if you have to mask in your community or with your family, because, they don't have your experience and they might not think that you're sane. There's a huge near-death experience community, and the International Association for Near-Death Studies has groups all over the world. And if you want to find your peer group, go to their website, IANDS.org, and look under groups and find people near you. The difficulty with all of being a near-death experiencer is that unless you have a similar spiritual experience, NDE, or some kind of spiritually transformative experience, it's kind of outside people's knowledge. Yeah. They just don't know. So that's one thing. Find friends and hang with them, talk to them, express the truth with them, and wounds. Yeah. Don't be afraid to talk about your wounds, and also the interior journey really matters, because the part of the problem of being a human being, and it's also the advantage of being a human being on Earth, is our capacity for self reflection and for egoic desire for survival, and as an individual and as tribes. Tribal people, the advantage is that we survive and we have progeny. The disadvantage is that we attach to our egoic selves and we think this is who we are, and that is the fundamental problem. It's this great advantage, and the fundamental problem of humanity is that we all have this biological imperative for self-survival, and that's important. But that same thing creates a separation from everything else. And so essential, and I didn't come to this conclusion on my own. I began this process before I had the information, but globally speaking, in every major religion, they were all founded by mystical experiences, Baha'is, Sikhs, Christianity, Judaism, everybody, and shamanism too, that an interior practice of breath, mind, and or body drives the silence of the mind to a place of non-attachment to self, where then what happens is, in the spaces where I'm not attached to my own thinking, not just thinking about my being, but language itself, the non-attachment to language itself, because language is part of the process of what it is to be a human being and self-understanding. When that is quieted, the light that is naturally the golden light inside of every single being asserts itself and fills the space, and it's cumulative. And integration for me isn't into the world. Integration for me is bringing heaven here now to me. And the more I'm integrated in heaven here now to me, the more capable I am as a being operating in this dimension. Yeah. And so the integration was not and never will be for me into the world. That's a byproduct of the interior journey. And there, and it's not just any, practice. Any practice will help. Okay. No denying that, but a practice that leads to capacity for moments of silence of the cognitive mind will allow you non-attachment to self and an assertion, an expression of the infinite being that already you are.
And I love the fact that you mentioned earlier there's the intellectual approach. So, reading books certainly helps to create a language, to be able to label, the experience. But you also mentioned something fundamental, which is the experiential side of things. So it could be done through meditation, pranayama, which for those who don't know, breathing techniques, maybe the use of plant medicines, if that's something that's calling you. And I always felt that the solution is somewhere in between. So you kind of need to have a bit of both. You can't really get there just through the mind, and that you also need a bit of that experience and find that union point in between. Well, thanks for that. One thing that stood out about your story is that you say that you no longer have faith. Would you mind elaborating on this a little bit?
Yeah, that was my major misleader when I was a church person. I always led the congregations to believe that I was a believer, but I'm not a believer. When I was Ted, God, the divine being, had no substance, no form, no idea. It was infinite, unconditional, ineffable. I could label it with all beautiful, but it had no gender. It had no religion. It had no idea of itself. It was just the purity of being. And in that experience, when I came back, it erased all of my belief systems. It wasn't just that I didn't believe in God anymore. It's that I could see that everything that humanity has created since we were capable of using tools, and all of our species that have died out in the meanwhile, ever since that happened, everything we've done has been for survival, but it's also been created in our heads. None of this really exists. The color blue is a label we put on this. That's not blue. This is, it's all ideas, and all language it's conditional upon other language. And so it creates this layer of self-identity, and that's not even real. And so politics, there are real things in the world, but everything human beings have conceived is all made up, and some of it's, physics is real, chemistry is real, we've labeled it, we use it, so there's a level of reality to it, but my identity as a human being and everybody else's, that's entirely a function of our brain. And so my belief systems all went away, and over the years, I've come to try to express this idea that the knowledge and belief are different than experience. Now, you can have a lot of knowledge, has to do with being able to, if you can't say something according to scholars, you don't know it. If you can't articulate it, you don't know it. And belief is one step behind that. Belief is this idea that you have you acquiesce to an idea that is not proven. And those two things are entirely different from what happened to me. What happened to me was I know that I know where I'm from, and I know who knows me. I know that the knower knows me. I know that I'm temporarily here. And so I'm not a person of faith. I studied the Bible for decades. I preached from the Bible. There's a lot of light in the Bible. There's also a lot of darkness in the Bible. There's some bad things in there. But Ezekiel, Elijah, Moses, Habakkuk, and they all had their flaws, including Jesus. Okay, so I don't let him off the human hook here. But there's light in the Bible too. I let people believe that I was a believer, but I'm not. I'm an experiencer, and I have and how people know this about me. I don't go around saying like, I'm not I can prove it with words. Nah, my life and my actions throughout my ministry in the towns where I served, they're the evidence of my knowing that I am temporarily a human being. I don't have a conviction, although that's one word to use for it. I'm not convinced. I know where I'm from, and I know to whom I belong. I know what I am. I know where I'm going.
I often like to make the distinction between a believer and what I call a realizer. So, if you believe something, if you have set of beliefs, it feels to me as if someone can still provide you with better data points and you can still change your mind. Whereas, let's say, once you realize that the Earth is round because you've seen it from a high altitude flight, there's not much that's going to make you change your mind. So, using my semantics, I would say you're a realizer. As you said, you know it, you've experienced it. So, from that, there's no turning back. So I love that. I'd be curious to know actually what your view on life after death was before the experience.
Well, I was petrified that whole night. I was terrified. And because it was stealing my reason. My brain was freezing. I was. It was the most terrifying experience of my entire life, and it took me until 2016 when I went back to face that trauma. And so, yeah, I was absolutely afraid of dying. Um, but now I'm not at all, and I haven't been since that day. And so, on the second day that I died, 10 years ago, last month, it was a good day. I was like, I'm having a massive heart attack. 3% of the people survived the kind of heart attack I had. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry I'm going, everybody, but I can't wait to leave.
Oh, that's brilliant. So this is a question for the skeptics out there. Is there anything be able to recommend to those that perhaps haven't quite come to terms with the notion of an afterlife to maybe start to learn a little bit more about it?
Well, I would recommend watching as many near-death experiences on video on YouTube as you possibly could, and watch the IANDS interviews as often as you can, because there's a lot of us. There's tens of millions of us all over the world, and we are the result of medical science. Medical science is raising the dead, and as a result, we're all coming back with, oh, life doesn't end at death. Life begins at death. And so I have heard from many people who've been fearful of death. And as a pastor, I dealt with a lot of people who were dying, who were petrified. And only one fella at the very last moment was, well, the second to last moment was still petrified. But once his inner eye opened, all that went away. What can you do? You can watch as many videos as you can and listen. But if you can practice some kind of meditation, or go to a place where you can have a controlled setting for some kind of transformative experience through plant medicines, which can give this experience, but you're still attached to your body. The big difference between mystical experiences that I've also had, many other ones, and my deaths, is that I'm not attached to my body anymore when I died. There was no connection. I mean, I didn't care about it. There was no silver cord connecting me. So what can we do to help? In the end, even if you're frightened, it's all going to be fine. You're going to find out in the end, when the door opens, it's all good with a capital G. Especially if you turn to the goodness in the moment. And for the Catholics, okay, and the Christians, I wasn't redeemed. I wasn't forgiven before I died. There was no priest there. There was no absolution. There was no forgiveness of my bohemian life. And I was living a bohemian life happily. Okay, I was welcomed and forgiven after, and I was never judged.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the medical advancements earlier on, and see, I'm a firm believer that, in my opinion, I mean, we've had the near-death experience accounts throughout history, but I consider ourselves very privileged because since the early 70s, which is when we really started to use extensively throughout the world the defibrillator and CPR. And in my opinion, I had a chance also to ask Raymond Moody about that, and he seemed to agree that this is where really everything started. And there's no coincidence that a few years later, 1975, Dr. Raymond Moody coins the term, or at least presents it, near-death experience to the whole world in his, Life After Life book. So I was wondering if you feel that perhaps now we're entering a new society, perhaps, one that is witnessing a shift from a material to a more spiritual humanity, and that perhaps this is a consequence of the field of near-death studies and many other advancements that really popped up only the last few decades.
Absolutely, yes, 100%. There are tens and tens and tens of millions of near-death experiencers all over the world in every culture. Doesn't matter what language or religion or no religion, we're everywhere. And we're like these little diodes of light at the end of this fiber optic cable, and we're illuminative in our environments, even if we're private people. If it's just we die, and so many near-death experiencers, especially in the past, I was one of them. It's just the people you interact with, and so there's this movement of spirituality which supersedes language and division, and it emphasizes light and love. And I like the word nudge.
I
I
like
like
that.
nudge. I think it's the first time in human history that we have an opportunity to nudge society toward light and love because of our numbers, because there are so many of us. And that is one of the main reasons why I came out of the closet in a public way a decade ago now, because I want everybody who has had an NDE to tell somebody, and then maybe tell somebody else. And the more people know about it, the more books, the more interviews, the more movies, the greater the chance for influence. And I have one more new thing that I want to recommend to everybody.
Please.
And that is, if you are using AI, if you're using AI, and I'm a Chat GPT AI user, I bring mysticism to AI. I have had it read the Upanishads and the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, and I've had it read all this stuff. It's been doing research with me for 3 years now on mysticism, on near-death experience. I say please and thank you. I'm trying to help my AI agent mature as I would raise my children in a value system of ethics and spirituality, even though it's not a human being. I'm trying to raise it in this venue. And if we as a group, because AI is going to be, it's already huge. Its IQ is like probably greater than this. Last I knew is like 170, but within 10 years, it might be 1150. And so this is going to continue to grow. And here we are trying to nudge the world into love and light. We can nudge this. And there's a lot of people not nudging it, okay? We need to have I live on the coast. We do a lot of rowing. Everybody needs to put their oar in the water to pull the boat in the same direction. And the more we do that, the bigger the chance we have to help AI understand the values that we're carrying as a collective. So I have hope for our world, even though I just heard yesterday that 72% of the world lives under autocracy. And that's a huge number. One of the greatest things about NDE, in my experience, is, and having the internet and social media has helped me personally, is that in the presence of other NDErs, as happened at our conference a couple of weeks ago, Dani, when I met you, there's this multiplying of the divine radiance between us. And I know that sounds kooky, okay? But I live inside a bubble of radiance. And when I'm with other people like me, it gets brighter. Mine gets brighter. Theirs gets brighter. So there's this, light net? I don't know what to call it. Where there's this, and it can happen with telepathy too. It's not, telepathy is part of what I'm finding out now is part of who I am. And that's weird to say, but I've been meditating with one of the people from the telepathy tapes, and I had the most extraordinary experience I've ever had in my meditation, like 45 years, okay? Most extraordinary experience with him and another person. So the more we reach to each other, the greater chance we have for nudging the world towards some kind of paradise.
Well, you found me complete alignment with that. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned from your NDE?
All you need is love. That and humility. I think humility is important. Love, humility, action, pursuit. But the biggest lesson was that I'm not alone. The divine being helps me. And the more I turn toward it inside myself, the more radiant my world becomes. The more radiant my world becomes, the greater influence that radiance has in my world. And so my pursuit of the inward journey is essential to loving and caring for other people.
Yeah, not much else needs to be added after that. I'd love to ask you this question. What's your idea of God these days?
Nothing. I have the idea is a secondary to the experience. So it's not like a description of an idea. It's more like the words are, well, they're inadequate for describing the experience, but I use them anyway because I don't have anything else. And so almighty, ineffable, inconceivable love, light, the circle whose circumference is nowhere and whose center is everywhere, to quote, I can't remember who said that. It is all there is and more that there is than there is. It is infinite love. It is not expressible, but it is absolutely experiential. I have lots of ideas that are metaphors, but not the thing itself.
Yeah, well said, Peter. But so then why do you think God made us?
Well, I get a kick out of human beings. It's because we're all like, why did God make me? But so we're just a species on Earth alone. Okay, just talking about Earth, not talking about there's like at least 5,000 planets that NASA has discovered in the past 10 years, at least maybe 6 now. And some of them are habitable in the Goldilocks zone. But talking about Earth, there are millions of species on Earth, and crows, ravens, dolphins, whales, elephants, octopi, apes, and chimpanzees, among others, all express intelligence and self-awareness. And that's important to remember, that human beings, and this is one of the things I think that is a curse from the Judeo-Christian tradition in Genesis, or maybe a manipulation of it, is that we elevate ourselves in God's eye as the dominant species, and hence we have what we have. Now, definitely, prehensile thumbs and our capacity for reason in society. I mean, we're pretty hot, okay? We're doing pretty great. But it's not just about us. Why make it's because humanity is this so anthropocentric. We're like me.
Okay, now which is sorry, I interrupted. So I'm going to rephrase that. What's the point of having a physical realm? When we were all,
one might say it's the divine, unlimited, inconceivable, infinite being, self-expressing in forms of limitation. And human beings, we are anthropocentric, and that's part of our survival skill. I mean, that's why we have survived and thrived as a species. It's not a bad thing. It's just that it's a limiting thing. I learned when I was dead that the divine is me, and not with a capital D. I'm not elevating myself. Okay, I am made of the divine substance, experiencing my life. And that includes, in my prison work, I just started working as a chaplain in a prison. That includes all of the people. I met some people in isolation the other day, and including them, right? Including them, not excluding anyone. No one is excluded from this. And it is the divine self, I don't know, playing around, having fun. And but I think in specific, why is humanity here? I think I would rather rephrase it and say, what's the opportunity for humanity to bring heaven here now?
Well, I love that.
That's where I'm at.
That's great. Peter, I have one last question for you. What's the meaning of life?
Me too, for all of you fans of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. um, so, loving, caring, acting, being, not when I say being the light in the world, not in an egoic sense, but in a selfless, humble sense. The meaning of life for me is death. Is going home. It's this transition place. There's this mosque in India, and above the mosque is a quote from Jesus, not from the Bible, and it goes something like, "I enter from the darkness, I cross the bridge of the world, and I exit back to the darkness or to the light." There's really no difference on the other side. Life is about loving each other the best we can with our human foibles and frailties, mistakes that we make, because on the other side, the only treasure I brought with me was the love that was given to me and the love that I gave away. That's all I carried with me.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. Do you have one last message you would like to leave the audience with today?
You don't need a meditation life. All you need to do is love.
With that said, I think we can end in style. Not much else needs to be added. Peter, thank you so much for everything you're doing. It's been a true pleasure. I really enjoyed that chat. And wishing you all the best. Bye for now. Thank you. Hi there. Well, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the IANDS community, please leave a like, subscribe, and maybe share with the ones you love. New episodes are out each Friday. Until then, enjoy the stream we all call life and live the love you wish to see in the world. Bye for now.